Thank you everybody for coming. It's wonderful to see a full house. So when I was a little girl, around about the age of 8 to 10, I fell in love with horses, like most maybe little girls do. And there is my mum taking me, and I think one of the very first horses that I rode in my life. So being horse crazy, I read a lot about horses. And one day I read about and I saw, but there are horses on the Camargue. And as you know, the Camargue is these dunes in the south of France. And the legend says that these horses are wild horses, left there by gypsies, and they're white, and they still roam for free on this coast. And I thought, that is just wonderful. And they're up there, and somehow, when you're a child, you think you have magical powers. So in my head, I connected with these horses. And I made them a promise, and I said, I don't know how, and I don't know when. But one day, I promise you, I will find you. So wait for me. I will find you. Which is quite an ambitious promise, I think, from a middle-class Afrikaans little girl in South Africa with all the sanctions that we had against us in the 80s. But I promised them I would find them. And then life happened, and you can see there I joined the police force at some stage, but I'll get to that later again. And many people wrote articles about me, and that eventually is how I got to France. So after school, I went to university. I didn't have a choice. You'll see why just now. And I studied languages and French, and I had German at school. And then I became a journalist for about 8 years. And during that time, met my husband. And about 6 years later or so, I divorced my husband. Happens. Okay. And then I decided I'm going back to university. So around about the age of 28, I went back to university, and then I started studying honors degree in psychology and master's degree in psychology as well. And then my master's degree was about the theories of Freud. And then one day, one of our professors had a list of topics that we had to do an assignment on. And one of the topics was about serial killers. And I really didn't know if I picked it or if nobody else wanted it. But I got serial killers. And when I was a little girl, I cried in Bambi. So I never thought I would do this work. So anyway, here I am with the serial killers. And then I saw the connection between Freud's theory on the psychosexual developmental phases of children and the origin of serial killers. Because I could read a crime scene, and you can see where there was a fixation, and I'll talk about that a little later, in one of these psychosexual developmental phases, and that sort of made sense. And then I did a lot of research about that, and I found it every time, in every case study that I looked at. So I went to one of my professors, the one that I was doing my master's dissertation with, and I asked him, could I change it to this topic? And he said, no, you're 3/4 almost done with the Oedipus complex in women, for my master's. He said, keep this one and do it for a doctorate's degree. So then I had a plan, really, to become a doctorate in psychology either. It sort of happened. And God said, a lot of stuff to do in my life. Make stuff just happen. In any case. So I got the master's degree, and by then I was already busy with a doctor's degree on serial killers and their developmental phases. So during that time, the South African Police Service psychologists, they called the professors, and they asked, is there somebody that they could nominate that could be a profiler, because they needed one in the police. So the professor said, well, we've got Micki, and she's busy with her doctorates on this. And they said, no, send her. Okay. So they sent me, and I got the job. And then also, I got, this is going to work. I got the doctorate's degree, and that is my dad. And My dad was the vice rector of the University of Pretoria, so I told many people I didn't really work for the degree, I got it. I worked hard. And he was also an avid yachtsman. He was a member of the Transvaal Yacht Club and the Nice Now Yacht Club, so today, seeing all the yachts, just feel like he's here today. So that's my dad. So then I got appointed in the police. And on the very first day, our brigadier called me in. This is the psychology unit. And he said, are you aware that there is a serial killer down in Mitchell's Plain in Cape Town? And I said, yes, I've read about it in the newspaper. He said, what are you waiting for? He said, get you out there. So there I was on a plane on my way to Cape Town on my very first day. And I was so naive that when I landed at the airport, I expected there to be policemen in uniform waiting for me. I didn't even know detectives wore plain clothes. I didn't know. So I landed at the airport and there's nobody with a little board with my name on, nothing. And then I just spotted these very big men sitting in the bar and they had the standard police moustache. And I walked up to them and I said, are you waiting for me? And then they just looked me up and down and they said, do you want a beer? And I said, okay, right. And the very next day we started. So the very next day I went into Mitchell's Plain and I was wearing a black miniskirt and black stockings and black high heels. It was the last time. So they said, okay, tell us about serial killers. And they were sitting there and I told them what I knew. So they were just looking at my legs, they weren't really listening. And then the captain at that stage was Captain Johan Kotze. And he said, I'm going to pick you up tomorrow morning. I was living at the IPA, the International Police Association, beautiful old house. And he said, and then we're going to go out to the dunes and look at the crime scenes and wear jeans. So we did that. The next morning he came there and then he came with a scrambler bike. Luckily I grew up on bikes, my stepfather had bikes. And we went into the dunes and at one of the crime scenes, remember this is my third day in the police. This is the station strangler that killed 22 little boys. And at one of the crime scenes, while we were sitting there, I noticed there was still a little hand of one of the little boys. And we collected it, we put it in a checker's bag. That's what we had with us. And I had to drive back on the back of the bike with this child's hand. And that really brought it home to me. You know, and that it's not just what you read. Okay. And then from there it started. So the next slide that I have is upsetting. It is a slide about one of the little boys and one of the other crime scenes. I don't usually do this, but I do it with respect, so that people can learn from it. So if it is not good, if you don't want to look at it, then just close your eyes. Okay, so okay, so the one at the top, that is one of the victims of the station strangler. And why that specific one is you can see how his shirt is really tucked in tight to his pants. Now, that little boy has been... So the fact that his shirt is tucked into his pants again means after the crime. He did that. Okay. That is a sign psychologically of undoing, trying to restore it as it was before. All right. And that usually means that he's feeling bad about it in some sense. He's trying to undo it. So in profiling, if we find a sign of undoing like that on a crime scene, then I know that there is a remote sense, a very remote sense of what Freud called the superego, which is your conscience. So when we arrest this guy, we can work on his conscience a little bit to get him to confess, which worked eventually. Okay. The bottom one is was a very interesting case, and that is a case of a pyromaniac. Now, pyromania are people that get excited about fire. And this one specifically, when he sets And he sets people alight. Now you can see there is no conscience there. No conscience at all. Okay, so it's a rare case. And what was very rare about this case is there were two of them operative. Okay. We got both. Well, the detectives got both. Mike van Aunt was the detective. Okay, so we'll skip this one. Okay, so then, I've always been a writer first, before I'm a psychologist. I'm an author, and I always need to write. So in order for me to start making sense of this, I write, and I started writing this down. And then at some stage, there was literally an agent, and they came to me and they said, people start writing newspaper articles and etc. about it. And then they said, would you not like to write a book about this? And I said, I've already written. They said, turn it into a book. So I turned it into a book. And then the agent in Britain had the book, and I had a contract with him, but nothing happened for about 2 years or so. And then he said, no, your book is it's not going to sell. Really? Anyway, so, and eventually then Penguin came to me, and then they said, we're very interested in your book. And I said, well, I thought there's nothing going to happen to it. It's not a good book. They said, no, it's an excellent book. The guy just wanted too much money for it. I said, but I have the rights again to the book. And they said, we're going to take the book. And they signed me up as one of the authors. And since then, I've written many books. Catch Me a Killer was the first one. And then there was another one called Strangers on the Street, which we might also be turning into a TV series now. And there's another one called Fatal Females. And green one there. Fatal Females is about South African women that kill. And always when I speak to a ladies group, sorry, gents, if you want, you can buy the book, don't read it, just put it on your bedside table. It has results. And then there was another one called Profiling, Serial Killers and Other Crimes, and an Afrikaans one of Catch Me a Killer, and then I wrote a novel. And then for the gents, I also wrote another book called Heroes, and that's men's perspective on relationships, which is also available, I think, on Amazon. It's a psychology book about what men think, really, about relationships, but that's a topic for another day. So, yeah. So there we are. Those are the books. And then, through all of this, as well, I was invited all over the world to start lecturing. And one of the favorite places that I lectured was in France. And I was invited by the Centre International des Criminels Internals. So luckily I had French at school, at university, a little while. So I went there for about 5-6 consecutive years, and from being in a hotel in the beginning, eventually they got me a little apartment, and I was very fancy living my little Parisian life. Lovely. And I also love archaeology. That's a big passion of mine. So I would always go and visit all the archaeological sites and whatever when I'm there. But there I was, lecturing them. And those are European profilers. So they came from all over Europe, and I taught them about profiling. So that was a wonderful time. And the one at the bottom is in Bramshill, and that is in England. And the guy next to me with a red tie, that is Robert Resler, which was the veteran FBI profiler as well. And he taught me in Scotland. So I was trained by him and Robert Resler when they were ex-FBI profilers, but they were the first generation. Really, really interesting. So I was second generation. There is Thomas Müller, he's from Interpol as well. So that was quite wonderful in Britain, teaching there. Now, through all of this, when I was in Paris, one day the magazine Paris Match, they called me. And they said, we'd like to do an article about you. I said, oh, that's nice. And then they said, okay. there's the article, and then they said, but we read somewhere that the wind is your favorite element. I said, yes, I like the wind. And then they said, but the only place we want a photograph of you with the wind blowing in your hair. It's unusual, but okay. And then they said, well, the only place where the wind is blowing tomorrow in France is the southern coast of France, and we will fly you there. I said, that's nice. And they came to pick me up early in the morning, and they flew me down to the coast of France, and there was a photographer in a big SUV, Land Rover Jeep type of thing, picked me up, and drove out to the dunes. And they came. I couldn't believe this. Now my mother, when she brought me up, she said, you can become anything that you want in life, and I believe in you. And this was my childhood dream. And as I was standing there in the dunes, just from over the dunes, they just came. And they cantered over and they snuggled up in my neck, and the photographer just took pictures. And they said, you promised us. And we wanted you. We waited for you. And then I was spending the whole day running around and having fun with these horses, because somebody believed in me. So that's quite something, like a miracle in my life. And that was my mom believing in me, and my dad encouraging me. So sometimes I think, what are we telling our children?